Do you have something you want to visualize, but you don't quite know what the data needs to look like, or maybe what the screens need to look like? Stick around. We'll try a few different things, a few different tools to see if we can make that happen. Okay, so what are we trying to do? Well, here we want to develop a UI prototype. So this doesn't have to be Power BI, but in this case, that's what we're using to visualize and interact with some new relational data. So relational is really the key point here, where we're specifically trying to be relational. We know that Power BI can work with relational data. But, we may sometimes approach things in a different way. In this case, things aren't necessarily clearly defined. So we know what we want to see, but the data model isn't clearly defined. And we don't necessarily want to sort of spin our wheels, trying to figure that out and then start visualizing. We want to actually try to do this all at the same time. So we need tools to efficiently prototype the data model and an associated UI. Now, the go-to for many people, and for myself, would often be Excel. But in this case, we want to be specifically relational. So we're actually going to have a look at Microsoft Access. And we're going to pair that up with Power BI. So Access is something I used a long, long time ago and sort of almost forgotten about. But it's actually quite a surprisingly capable and efficient tool to actually develop relational data models and enter data. So this is more of an exercise in playing around with Access and seeing how it works with Power BI, really for prototyping and rapid prototyping, not necessarily for your end result. So Access can model joins, probably better than Power BI can. You can import and link from many data sources, so you can actually use Access as a bit of a pivot point to pull in data, and you can do it all from your desktop. It's SQL compatible. Tables and data can be exported to various formats. So what you do in Access, you can potentially then uplift to other systems if this is something that you're trying to start and then grow. But also, Access plays nicely with Power BI. So it faithfully represents table relationships when you import. So that reduces your work in Power BI. Tables and most, I'll say, queries are available for import. So that enables alternative ways for you to transform your data outside the UI, in this case, Power BI. Because some of that Power Query work can sometimes get quite involved. Sometimes it's not that easy. And some people may be more familiar from a data perspective and more familiar with tools like Access to be able to transform your data. But one of the other things that I really want to highlight here is there's quite a quick feedback loop. So changes made in Access are actually immediately available on refresh in Power BI. So if you're using a local file rather than, I guess, having to sync via, say, OneDrive, it's surprisingly quick feedback loop to actually get things done. So Power BI can also handle most common UI patterns and elements. So for read-only query-based access to data, so you've got some static data, or rather some data that you're not going to be updating necessarily on the fly. Power BI can really, make that sort of data sing and dance, right? So you can visualize that data and query and slice and dice and filter that data in a really interactive way, and produce a really engaging prototype to actually sell your idea. So if this is something that you're trying to pitch to someone, it's a great way to do that, to get something done quickly. So what is our example? Well, I thought, why not? Let's take a look at Formula One. So Formula One racing, the drivers' championship table. And so what does that look like? Well, it looks a little bit like this. So this is from the Formula One site. So we're currently in 2024. This is March. No, yep. Actually, no, we're in April now. And there's been 3 races so far. So not many points on the board, but this is just the top few. And so anybody familiar with Formula One or racing in general, you have drivers, you have cars, you have races and constructors. And so there's a bunch of different entities, I guess you could say, in this whole relationship model. And we're going to try and model a few of those things. So we've got it sort of somewhere straight in our heads of what that might look like, but we're going to build it up. So this may take a little bit of time, but stick with me. You know, hopefully you'll see a bit of thought process and a bit of progress as we go, and we can figure it all out. So without further ado, let's jump into Microsoft Access, because this is where we are going to start. So we're going to start with a blank database. I've got a few notes I'm going to work from here, so I'm not completely blind, but hopefully, we won't take too long to get some of this going. So what are we going to call this? We'll call this Formula One. And okay, so when you come into Access for the first time, so anybody with a Microsoft 365 license will have access to Access. So what we're going to do, when you first come in, you'll be presented with a new table that you can add. I'm not a big fan of that particular interface, so what we're going to do is go here, create table. Oops, I've just gone into the same thing. Create table design, right? So let's start with drivers, right? So there's a few little conventions that Access is quite happy with and quite good with. So what we're going to do actually, so we're in a drivers table. I'm going to call this ID, and Access likes the idea of an auto number. So this is really just an incrementing automatic ID. I'm not going to bother with descriptions. These should be fairly self-explanatory. So let's go with driver name. Short text is fine. That's 255 characters. Let's go nationality, right? So short text again. We're just going to go with the sort of the acronyms for the or the country codes. Nationality, and we know that drivers belong to constructors. So let's put in a constructor ID here, which by convention, again, if that's going to be the key on another table, let's make that a number, and that's going to be a long integer, which is the same data type as auto number. Now we don't have that defined yet, right? So we'll come to that in a moment. So when we save this, let's save this as driver. There is no primary key. Okay. Well, what we'll do, we'll add that primary key here, and now we will save this as driver. Done, right? So we now have one table. What we're now going to do is add another table called constructor, right? So again, similar to driver, we're going to give that an auto number, and we'll call this constructor name. And short text, again, that's all good. For now, I don't think we want to bother with anything else in here, but what we are going to do is say ID is the primary key, and we're going to save that as constructor. Okay, so now let's come out of there and let's go into database tools and relationships. So this is where we start to draw some of the relationships. And this looks, incredibly familiar for people who are used to Power BI and drawing the relationships there in your modeling tab. So what we want to do is make a relationship between driver and constructor. So here, the one table, or where the constructors are defined, is in the constructor table. And we're going to just draw over to here. So ID in this table goes to constructor ID in that table. People may like or not like some of the naming conventions. Look, this is just an illustration. So we want to enforce referential integrity here. So this actually makes it an actual link or an actual join. So we're going to create that. So now we've got one to many here. Now, another thing that we can do, let's just save this. Another thing that we can do to make things a little bit easier when we are actually changing our data or adding our data. So in the driver table, we're going to go back in here. Oops. And we're going to go into design view. And the constructor ID here, so you see how this is, let's just have a quick look here, right? So we have this little tab down the bottom here. And what we're going to do is going to look up, and instead of a text box, we are going to make that a list box. And we're going to have a table or query, and we're going to go to the constructor table. So what this is allowing us to do, so bound column will be the first one, which is the ID, and then the second column, we're going to show both columns, and we're going to say, yes, show me the column headings. Allow multiple values, no, good. Okay, so then what happens is if I save this, we now, when we create a driver, we're able to actually pick the constructor. So first of all, let's go into the constructors, right? And we're going to add, who are we going to add? We're going to add Ferrari. So you notice there that we have the ID 1. We're going to add McLaren. We're going to add Red Bull. Who else? That'll probably do it for now. Now you notice these little pluses here. What this actually allows us to do, it notes the relationships, and it actually allows us to add the drivers in here. So under Ferrari, and then it'll draw the relationship. The other way, which is the way that I was showing you before, is in driver name here, sorry, in constructor, you can actually then, if I just expand this was the lookup, I can actually look up here. So this is how we're going to do it. So we're going to add, who should we add? Max Verstappen. I may butcher some of the names here. So he's from the Netherlands. Alrighty, so we've got constructors and we've got drivers. Okay, cool. We want to save the layout, yes. All right, now this is where this is a one-time thing where I actually need to close down access. So we're going to close down access, and what we're going to do is now go into Power BI. Okay, so in Access, here's our database. So when you first make the connection, the database needs to be closed, otherwise it won't be able to lock the data. Okay, so as we can see here, we've got our couple of tables, constructor and driver. Okay, they're all good. Okay, so now we have our two tables over here. And if we look in our model view, you can see we actually have our relationship here as well. So this is all good, looks good. All right, let's go back to Access and load up our database. Okay, so now we have constructors, we have drivers, and so now we've got to start thinking about results. How do we model those results? Well, in order to have results, you actually need races. So let's add another table for races. Okay, so again, back in the same way, auto number, that's the race. And races appear in countries. So the tracks do have names, but let's just go with country. And let's make a race date as well. Okay, and let's add the primary key here and save that as race. And so country, so the first one was Bahrain. Alrighty, okay, so now we have races as well. Cool. So let's think about results, okay? So another table here. So the first thing that we want to do is associate with a race, right? So race ID, number. So we'll use that as another relationship here. We need to think about, well, who achieved a result? Well, there's a driver. So driver ID, that's another number because we know that was another ID. And what position did they come? So we're explicitly making a choice here not to put points, because what we actually want to do is link off to another table that defines what position, what points each position gets. So again, we're just exercising the thoughts of relational modeling here. This is, there's different ways to do this. You could flatten all this data out, and actually we'll be doing that a little bit later. But what we're doing here is trying to tackle some of these issues of prototyping with data and the visuals. So what's the position? Okay, well, that's just going to be a number. And yeah, let's leave it there for now. Okay, so race ID and driver ID, that will be a primary key together. So two things there will make as a primary key. So that's composite key. And let's save that as driver race result. Cool. Okay. So what we can do there is add in, actually, first of all, race ID. Let's do another little lookup here. Make that a list. Let's link off to race, column count 2, column headings yes. And then on this one, let's also do list. And it's this one, driver ID, so we want to go off to the driver table. Again, column count 2, column heads yes. All right. So now when we do this, so driver ID, let's make that a bit bigger. And let's make the race ID a bit bigger as well, because now what we're going to do is actually just enter in some data. So the race, let's say in Bahrain, I'm pretty sure that Max Verstappen, so again, we're putting in numbers here, but we're choosing by the name, right? So pretty sure that Max Verstappen was first, and I'm pretty sure that Sergio Perez was second. Actually, what we're going to do, I'm going to delete that row, actually. Delete the record. Yeah, because I want to just show you what happens when we add data. Okay, so driver race result. Okay, we want to save that. Yes. Okay, let's just go back to Power BI now. Because what we want to do And notice I've left access open here. What we want to do is just pull in those other couple of tables and see what that looks like. Now, if I were to go back and say, okay, get data from access, I'll have the same issue again, and I'd have to actually close access. But there's an easier way here, because if we just go to edit query and I bring this fellow over here, a little bit annoyingly big, so I've got different size monitors, but here we go. All right, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to duplicate this, and we're going to duplicate it twice, because what we're going to do here is we're going to call this race, and this was driver race result. All we need to do here is in the navigation actually refresh the preview, right? And then lo and behold, oh look, our extra tables have arrived. So race and driver race result. Beautiful. So now, right, if I close and apply that, we've now got our extra data and our extra tables. So we have constructor, driver race result, and race, right? So now though, how many rows have we got there? We have 11 rows in total. Let's just go back to access driver race result, and we're now going to add that final result for Australia. Oscar Piastri was 4th. All right. So now if I just refresh again, then that extra row just appears, which is kind of cool. So now, so what you can see is if you add data to an already existing table, you know, obviously that will just appear, but you don't actually have to close like you potentially would with Excel. If you're adding new tables, you can actually just pull them in by just refreshing your preview and grab that extra table when you duplicate your table query. The other cool thing is that if you add fields to an existing table, they will just automatically appear as well when you refresh the query. So that's actually kind of cool. And we're going to do that in a moment because we're going to find that we're missing something. Okay, so let's just go back to our data. And if we look at our relationships here, and if we just go show table, so we have driver and constructor, we need race, and we need driver race result. Okay, so let's see what other things can we relate here. So we have race ID. Well, let's draw that to there, and we'll enforce that, right? So race to driver race result, and then driver ID here, let's make that go to driver. Cool. Okay. And the good thing is that we know that all of this works out because we've already got the lookups to actually select that data. Okay, so that's all good. Now, how do we get points for each of these drivers? What we actually need is another table now. So again, you could actually just put that straight into the driver race result table, but what we don't want to do is have too much duplication. So let's actually add another table. And this is going to be, so race position, we're going to say is a number. We want the driver points, which is going to be another number. And I think that will be it for now. Now, what you could do again, if we wanted to actually track the Constructors Championship as well, we could actually have constructor points and then link that to the constructors and provide, all the information there too. But let's just keep this nice and simple. So for now, race position, we're just going to keep there with the points. Now, for the more astute people who know about Formula One, there's different types of races. You can actually add for the sprint races, there's different points, all sorts of different things here. So we're keeping this nice and simple, but the race position essentially is the primary key for this. Now, in other cases, you may actually add the race type as well, but this is more, again, illustration. All right, so let's save that. And this is going to be called race position points. Okay, so save that. And what we're going to say here is, well, first of all, let's make this nice and simple. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Now, only the first 10 get points, and I need to remember what they are now. So we have 25, and I think we have 18. Actually, I know it goes down to 10, so that's 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then is it 12 and 15? I think it's 15 and 12. Well, we'll figure it out when we we'll figure out whether we got that right when we try to link this again. Okay, so now we have that table, race position points, right? So we can now link this position to that position here, and we can enforce that too. So that enables us to actually now start to actually get some view of the points that were derived from each of the positions that the drivers achieved in each race. So rather than that be, as I say, actually added as points on this table, we actually want that to be dynamic. So the way that we can do that is via a query. So the good thing is as well that Power BI can actually import these queries. So it can import essentially dynamic data. And so again, you could see this as a bit of an analogy with Power BI. So obviously you can create dynamic tables in Power BI via DAX, etc. But again, if you want to keep all of this separate, or you've got a view that this might become an application and you're actually trying to design a database that might sit behind some screens, this is probably a better way to think about it, because you're actually separating those concerns out a little bit. So let's just take a quick look. So first of all, we probably want most of these, in fact. Actually, let's just add all of these tables in, because what we actually have is relationships with all of these. So first of all, let's say, okay, we have the country of the race. So we have the race, what date it was. We have the driver name, what's their nationality, who do they drive for, what position were they? Actually, let's say race date. Let's make the position go in here. So we have position, driver name, nationality, constructor name, and the driver points. So if I save that as race result points, let's call it. And now let's just take a look at this. So in Bahrain, on the race date, position 1, 2, 3, 4, Max Verstappen, 25, 18, 15, 12, 25, 18, 15, 12. Awesome. Okay, I think we are ready to actually start taking a look at something in Power BI. All right, let's flick back. Okay. So let's call this page driver standings, for instance. And now what we want to do is actually go back and get some more of our data in. So edit the query. Okay, so again, we refresh the preview and we duplicate one of these queries. And now we move to our race result points. So you can see that's a slightly different view there. So that's a query rather than a table. So let's add that in. No value given for one or more required parameters. I think that might just be a warning. So we will close and apply that. So we're going to call that, what was it called? Race result points. And let's see if that works. Oh, it loaded some data. Okay, so let's have a look here. Race result points. Well, hey. So now we have all of our driver points. Okay, so in our driver standings, let's just make ourselves a pretty simple table here. And what we want to do is look by driver and by points, right? So race result points, let's just make this a little bit bigger. So we want to go first of all by driver name, and then we want to look, okay, maybe what's their country, who do they drive for, and what are their points, and we want to, that's right, we want to do that way. But what we, sorry, no, that's not country. We want to take that one out because that's actually going to remove the group by. We want the nationality, not the country. Nationality of the driver, not the country of the race, because country of the race makes that single rows and you just get one per result. Whereas what we want is the group, which is Max Verstappen is on 50 points, Charles Leclerc on 45, etc., etc. So this is grouped by each race. Now, if we just go back here and take a look at drivers, oh, Max Verstappen's actually got 51 points. How does that work? And Charles Leclerc actually has 47 points. Well, so if we just go back here to races, what we'll see is that in Bahrain, for instance, fastest laps, Max Verstappen actually got the fastest lap, and in different ones, other people got the fastest lap. So Charles Leclerc must have got the fastest lap. So let's actually just go back here and I'll just show you one last little thing. So race position points, we're going to be a little bit lazy here. Again, we could do this separately, but let's call this fastest lap points, and we're going to make that a number. Whoops, another number, and we're going to say the default value will be 1 because the fastest lap points is 1, assuming you're in the top 10. But and of course, because I've already got all the data in here, I'm just going to, oh, actually, no, that's right. Actually, if you're not in the top 10, then you get 0 for the fastest lap. There we go. The model works. All right. But now, how do we apply that fastest lap to our driver race results? Because here, Max Verstappen still has all of that. So let's take a little look at the driver race result. Well, we need to say whether or not they have the fastest lap. So, whoops. Let's close. Driver race result. Let's go to design view, and let's say is fastest lap. And we're going to say this is yes or no. So this is just a tick box, basically. So let's view that. So driver one, who is, this probably could have been better. Let's say he got the fastest lap there. And then I think, let's have a quick look here. So fastest laps, Charles Leclerc, he was second. So races, Saudi Arabia, Charles Leclerc, and then Australia was Carlos Sainz. Oh no, he got it in Charles Leclerc in Australia as well. So in the second race, oops, it's probably not great the way I've done this. 3, okay. So driver 3. Yep, he was second there, and he got fastest lap there. Okay, cool. So we've got all the fastest laps in here now as well. But how do we translate that to points? Okay, so rather than change anything else in any other tables, what we're actually going to do is change this in the query. So driver points. All right, so I actually have a little function here that I'm just going to paste in, because essentially what we want to say is if the driver race result, so if the fastest lap is true, is yes, then we want to add the driver points and the fastest lap points together. Otherwise, it's just the driver points. So what we're going to do here is build, and I'm going to paste in a rather funky looking thing here. So if the driver race result fastest lap is -1, which is true, race position points, driver points, plus race position points, fastest lap points, otherwise just get the driver points. So you can sort of build all of this stuff up, using these little dialogues here, or you can type it all out. So if I OK that, in theory, then, look, Max got 26 points, and Charles Leclerc got 16 on the next one. So now let's take another look. Well, let's just close this. I shouldn't really need to do anything else apart from refresh my data in Power BI. So if I refresh this, hopefully now we should see 51 points. We do. 51, 47. How does that go against our drivers' standings? 51, 47, 46, 40. I probably got one wrong somewhere. Sergio Perez. I probably got his. I think I missed him out in one of the other things. But you get the idea, right? And so once you have this, so driver standings, then you can start to do some other interesting stuff. So you can then start to say, well, okay, what does, let's have a look at driver detail, for instance. So for instance, we can now just say, okay, for a particular driver, let's just get a couple of cards, right? And maybe let's take the driver name and driver nationality, and then let's just take a bit of a look at maybe their points. So we'll take a look at the country of the race, their position. Oh no, not sum of position. We just want their actual position. Don't summarize. Driver position. Okay, driver points. Probably got that wrong here. Right, because we're showing everybody. That's right. So Carlos is just the first one here. So let's just do this. And maybe let's just do like a bar chart or something so we can see maybe the, let's go with the date as the X, and let's go, no, not with that. Let's just go with the race date, and let's go with points as the Y, right? So again, we've got these different ones at different times. And what we're going to do is use this as a drill through page. So I'm going to make this hidden, because often it's good to have drill through pages as hidden. And I'm going to put a drill through on the driver name. So what, and then that's added this little dude at the top here. So now let's just go back to driver standings. And if I look at Charles Leclerc, I can now drill through to driver detail. And now we see Charles Leclerc's performance on the different races. And also, you know, the different standings there. So clearly, you know, all of this can be built up. But the point is that, you know, what we've done is do all of this sort of work in tandem. We've built up the data model that sits there in Access, and we've happily just kind of brought that in. As you notice here, actually what we did was driver race results. See, we got fastest lap, and we added that field, and we didn't have to do anything to have that. Apart from refresh, we didn't have to do anything to have that actually reflected here in the front end as well. So it's a pretty easy and quick way, once you get a little bit of depth with it, to actually start prototyping and, you know, get something going that's actually interactive. Because obviously once the data's here, you can go to town in terms of the visuals and the theme and however you want to display it, and also slice and dice the data. You know, so slicing and filtering is obviously, you know, where Power BI comes to life. And, you know, this is where you can start to make it really cool. So hopefully this just gives a little bit of a view of, you know, how you might get something off the ground from scratch, right? We built this whole thing up from scratch. In the next video, what I plan to do is actually show a much simpler way to get a lot of this data a lot more quickly and pull it together much more easily. So stand by for that one. But for now, thanks for watching.